Religion and science are the two wings upon which man's intelligence can soar into the heights, with which the human soul can progress. It is not possible to fly with one wing alone. Abdu'l-Baha. If we say religion is opposed to science, we lack knowledge of either true science or true religion, for both are founded upon the premises and conclusions of reason, and both must bear its test. Abdu'l-Baha.
Thank you. So today our speaker is Mr. Ron Cohen, and his topic is atheism and science versus religion. Growing up in St. Louis, Mr. Cohen was raised Jewish, but never accepted any religion because as a lover of science and mathematics, he was an atheist going back as long as he can remember. At the age of 24, he moved to Los Angeles, and within a few weeks of that move, he met two girls who had just moved to LA from New York and were Baha'is. They introduced him to the faith, and he spent about 6 months fighting the idea of God and his manifestations. But reading the Baha'i writings and the writings of Albert Einstein, he proved himself wrong and became a Baha'i. Mr. Cohen spent the decade of the 70s traveling on the road with two Baha'i bands, Seals and Crofts, and England Dan and John Ford Coley. It was a wonderful Baha'i experience. He's been in the travel business ever since, booking travel mainly for the entertainment industry. He's also a writer, having published a book titled The Reality of It All, about life, death, God, religion, science, our dreams, and the Baha'i Faith. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. Cohen.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning to everybody. It's nice to be here. I'm glad everybody is here, no matter where you're from, no matter what time it is, morning, afternoon, evening. I live in Los Angeles, so it's early. As far as an introduction to the Baha'i Faith, I'm going to make it very, very brief because, gosh, if you start talking about the Baha'i Faith and introduction, you could talk for hours and hours and hours. There's so much to it. The Baha'i Faith is a religion. It is simply the latest chapter in God's book of religion. God has sent, in every religion, God has sent his messengers, call them messengers, prophets, manifestations, to teach us from age to age how to live life on this earth, how we should progress. Unfortunately, if you look around today, a lot of you might wonder, does this work? But as I said, the Baha'i Faith is a religion. It started in 1844 in Shiraz, Persia, which obviously today is Iran. And the two central figures of the Baha'i Faith were the Bab, B-A-B, which is a Persian title, which means the gate, and Baha'u'llah, which translated means the glory of God. These are the two twin prophet founders of the Baha'i Faith, and the teachings they have brought in the mid-1800s are for life on this earth, mankind on this earth, for the next 1,000 years. As I said, the Baha'i Faith is the latest, but certainly not the last. There will be prophets to come in the future, but as not for at least 1,000 years. Every prophet brings two sets of teachings that the religions are basically founded upon. They're spiritual and they're social. The spiritual teachings basically don't change because man's spiritual needs from age to age is pretty much the same. For instance, when Moses said it's basically wrong to kill, that applied then, it applies now, it'll apply always. But the other set of teachings the prophets bring, the social teachings, they change from age to age because mankind, civilization on this earth progresses, advances. We change socially. Our needs change. They become more complicated. So the prophet founders of the Baha'i Faith have brought laws and social teachings for us to live by for the next 1,000 years. Some of these principles that they have brought are the oneness of God, which simply means there's just one God. You'll hear people talk about gods. There's just one God, always has been, always will be. the oneness of religion, which means there's just one religion. There's only been one religion. It is the religion of God. As I said, what we call the different religions are simply different chapters of the same book. The oneness of mankind. On this planet, there is only one mankind. We're taught that the earth is one country and mankind are citizens. Doesn't make a difference if we're young or old or rich or poor or black or white or red or yellow or fat or thin. There is only one mankind. And we need to live on this earth like there is just one mankind. The principle of progressive revelation, which I will get into a little bit later, but it basically means that God, as I said, sends messengers from age to age, that revelation, just like human beings on this earth, is progressive. The elimination of all prejudices. This is something that, let me say, keep in mind, these teachings were revealed in the mid-1800s. Today, you'll hear some of these principles and say, yeah, you know, it's definitely something that I believe in, something we need, something that's happening. But back in the mid-1800s, some of these teachings were even considered blasphemous. But we need to eliminate all prejudices before we can ever think about having peace on earth. The equality of men and women. There's really not a lot to say about that because we all believe in that. Can you believe that I've been told that back in the early 1800s in Persia, they were bearing female babies born alive? I mean, we can't relate to this, but you know, today the equality of men and women is essential. We believe in it, but we don't see it everywhere. The need for a universal auxiliary language, the need for a universal compulsory education, and the need for a universal system of weights and measures is something that is really important for us to all progress, especially compulsory universal education. The elimination of extreme wealth and poverty in this world, not just between people, but between nations. It just doesn't make any sense for, on one hand, there's people that are starving, and on the other hand, there are people that have so much money. I don't even need to get into it because you know what I'm talking about. One of the beautiful principles is the need for a world government. We definitely need a world government on this planet, and we're considering the fact that we have reached a point in our social development where we have instant communication, rapid transportation. We need to have a world government to govern this planet. There has been attempts at it. It began with the League of Nations, which became the United Nations. Unfortunately, as far as being a world government, it really doesn't work. However, in the Baha'i Faith, there is a world government. There's the Baha'i world order, which works both on a local, a national, and an international level, and that's pretty amazing because I've been all over the world, and I have seen the Baha'i order actually absolutely work. The independent investigation of truth. When I heard about this is one of the things that attracted me to the Baha'i Faith. The fact that we are taught that mankind has reached a point in his social development that we no longer need to take somebody else's word for what is true, what is not true, what to believe, what not to believe. We have the ability to prove or disprove truth to ourselves if we have the desire or the need, or both. And everything we do is based upon what we want to do or what we need to do. Because of the independent investigation of truth, in the Baha'i Faith, there is no church or clergy. And I kind of like that. I like the fact there's no church or clergy. Then there was a principle. I couldn't believe when I heard it going to Baha'i firesides, they said there is an essential harmony between science and religion. I said, you got to be kidding me. I mean, come on. Science and religion have always been in disagreement with each other. So I thought. My history is real simple, as you heard a couple of minutes ago. I was born in the Midwest. I was born to a Jewish family, really Reformed Jews, and I was raised Jewish. I wasn't asked, do you want to be raised Jewish? I was raised Jewish because I was born to a Jewish family. I was considered Jewish. I went to Sunday school every Saturday. I still don't know why they call Sunday school on Saturday Sunday school, but they did. I went to Sunday school to learn about the history of the Jewish religion. I think when I was 10 years old, I went to Hebrew school every day after school. I could read, write, and speak Hebrew, so I could be bar mitzvahed, which I was when I was 13. But during all these days, I was an atheist. And I told my family, I said, look, I don't believe this stuff you're telling me. I don't believe this stuff they're teaching in Sunday school. I don't believe in God. I don't believe that Moses and Abraham were anything but wise men. I'm an atheist. And they said, no, you're not. You were born a Jew. You're a Jew. But I think I was an atheist going back to when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, because I always had an incredible love for science and mathematics, which I still love today. And that brings me, and as you just heard, I moved to LA when I was 24, 25. I heard about the Baha'i Faith for the first time in my life. I spent a half a year fighting it, and finally I proved, when I heard about let me interject. When I heard about the Baha'i Faith, I loved all the principles that I just spoke about. I thought a lot of them were utopian, but I loved them, except for the idea that there is a God and there is his prophets, his manifestations, and that science and religion, go hand in hand. This is where I hit a roadblock until I proved the existence of God to myself by reading. I think there are a couple books. There's a Life and Times of Dr. Einstein and the Universe and Dr. Einstein. I read those books, and I read the Baha'i writings, because Baha'u'llah and the Bab were the first prophets to write everything they ever said in their own hand. So, supposedly, if they're speaking the word of God, then what they wrote was the word of God. And when I read the Baha'i writings, I said, yeah, there's got to be a God. It was just logical to me. But then we get to science and religion. Science versus religion, if you want to call it that, or basically it's science versus God in a lot of ways. So what is science? Science is simply a tool we use to explain natural phenomena in the physical world. And what is so perfect about science is it's not perfect. Science is self-correcting. Perfect example of that is the speed of light. Albert Einstein postulated that the speed of light, which is 186,300 miles a second, and you can't comprehend that, but that's what it is. He postulated that is the maximum speed of any form of matter anywhere in the universe. And that was at that particular time accepted as fact. As a matter of fact, and I won't get into it, but they have physically proven that that's true, that no matter can go faster than the speed of light. However, I think it was back in sometime in the 90s, when there were a number of physicists that said, no, Einstein was wrong. There is matter that can go faster than the speed of light. And in the 2000s, these physicists said, something, we were wrong. Einstein was right. The speed of light is the ultimate speed, and this is fact. However, interestingly enough, recently, there are astrophysicists and physicists that say, because there are alternative universes, we believe that it is possible for matter to go faster than the speed of light. So at this point in time, all I can basically say is maybe yes, maybe no, but that is the beauty of science. It is self-correcting. Then you've got religion. What is religion? Very simply, religion comes from the Latin religio, which means to reunite. And that is the purpose of religion. Always has been, always will be, to reunite people on various levels as we progress. The early religious founders, the prophets of the early religion, came to unite people into families. Then there was the unification of families into tribes, tribes into cities, cities into nations. If I'm not mistaken, Muhammad came 1,000 years ago to bring about nationhood. Now we have reached a point where we have to unite the planet. We have to bring the nations together and unite as one planet. And that is the purpose of the advent of the Baha'i Faith, is to bring about planetary unity. Logically, 1,000 years ago, in the time of Christ, you couldn't think in terms of uniting the planet. I mean, who was here? But today, we have the ability for planetary unity, and it's necessary. I mean, if you look around what's going on in the world, look what happened in Maine last week, look what's going on in the Middle East, look what's going on all over the world. We need to unite this planet, and that's why God has sent new teachers to bring us new teachings in order to do so. And that's basically what religion is about. That's what progressive revelation is the religions and the revelations of the religions are progressive because we as a civilization and individually, we progress. So then you've got science versus religion. What it really is, in reality, is some of the new sciences in today's world versus, how do I say it, versus the dogmas and traditions and stories of religions of the past. Some examples. The religions of the past spoke about, okay, what do we have? We've got the burning bush talking to Abraham, telling him to sacrifice his son. We've got Moses bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt, and he parted the Red Sea. And he went up Mount Sinai and brought down the 10 commandments on 2 tablets. Although according to Mel Brooks, there were 15 commandments on 3 tablets, and Moses dropped one of them on the way down. This was in the movie History of the World Part 1. But then you had the virgin birth of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve being the first man and the snake, and then you've got Jonah living 4 days in the whale, and you've got heaven being a physical place with St. Peter at the pearly gates, and hell being a physical place with fire and brimstone. And these stories of the religions of old versus what science has to say about them today, these basically go against the laws of science as we know. And I can relate because I was an atheist, and I can understand, why there is this science versus religion. But science versus religion is also science versus the idea of God, because science deals with the physical. And the physical is what we can perceive via our 5 senses. This is the physical. And God is not physical. So you've got science versus God. What is God? According to the Baha'i Faith, and it makes total sense to me, God is how do I say it? God is a non-physical entity that has created all the universes, and supposedly there are more than one universe, that has created everything in all the universes, all life, everything we know of, out of his love. Just like a painter might create a painting because he loves what he is going to create. A musician might write a song that he loves because it's what he is there to create, and knows he will love his creation. God has created everything. He is an unknowable essence because he is not physical. This is God. So if you're talking about science versus religion, science versus God, what we're basically talking about is creationism and intelligent design versus randomness. Creation and intelligent design basically said that there was a creator, there is a creator, God, which I just spoke about, who created everything with a purpose, versus what science basically says is it all happened accidentally. It was all random. It's creationism and intelligent design versus randomness. And to me, thinking about this is where ego comes in. Ego and atheism go hand in hand. I honestly think that a lot of people who are atheists, one of the cause of atheism is ego, where we are not willing to submit that there is something that is non-physical, that we can't begin to relate to, that we realistically know nothing about, that is greater than we are, that knows better than us what's good for us, and that created everything. A lot of us have this ego. They just won't submit to that, and because of this, they're atheists. And a lot of people are atheists because of what's going on in the world. A lot of people will say, well, we're killing each other individually. We're killing each other country to country with war. There's cancer that takes the lives of 5-year-old children. If there was a God, why would he allow this? I can understand this way of thinking, but I'll tell you what the answer is. It's real simple. We have been created with freedom of choice. We are not God's puppets on a string. If we kill someone, if we start a war, this is done because we choose to do so, because we lack the spiritual teachings that God has given us. As far as something like cancer, diseases, we have the ability as a civilization to find the cure for all of these diseases if we put our heads together. I will say that as far as natural disasters go, part of life is tests and difficulties. And we grow from tests and difficulties, and everything that happens to us that we could say is negative. These tests and difficulties, how we face them, how we solve them is how we grow spiritually. Natural disasters are going to happen. I will say that God did not decide that we should screw up this planet because of disastrous climate change, because it's a fact that the amount of natural disasters that's happening these days and the severity of these disasters is all caused by climate change, and it's up to us to do something about it. Speaking of atheism, I have always loved to listen to what some of the great astrophysicists have had to say about everything. I remember Carl Sagan, who's no longer with us. He was not an atheist. He was an agnostic. Stephen Hawking, who was just absolutely brilliant. He was an atheist. He was a devout atheist, and he's no longer with us. However, one of my favorites, who I listen to all the time, is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson talks all the time about, and he's a brilliant astrophysicist, but he talks all about the time about the fallacy of religion and the idea that there just cannot be God because things could not have happened accidentally. The universe could not have created itself. No, I'm sorry. He said that it did happen accidentally. From the Big Bang on, everything happened accidentally and without purpose. And because of this, he is an atheist, and he was, and he speaks all the time about how there just can't be a God. Incidentally, he really recently said that religions are called faith because there is an absence of evidence. Faith is a firm belief with great conviction of something is true. I agree with that. But then it comes down to proof, because what is proof? Proof is evidence enough to establish that something has to be true. But there's two types of proof. There's physical proof, and there is faith. There are so many things that we can physically prove using science that I said before may or may not be true. But can you physically prove that God exists? Can science prove or explain the existence of God? Well, can science explain how one might feel when he hears a beautiful song? Can science explain if one person is brought to tears by listening to beautiful music? Can science explain why? No. Science basically deals with the how things happen, how things began, how things are, but they don't deal with the why. Religion more or less deals with the why. They tell you why things should be. But when it comes to proof, can we physically prove the existence of God? I don't think that can be done, but using mathematics and probability, I think we can prove the existence of God, and I'll tell you how. Let's look at everything that we know that's physical. From the smallest objects, we have molecules, and even smaller than molecules are atoms, which make up molecules. Atoms are made up of a nucleus with protons and neutrons surrounded by electrons, and even the nucleus of atoms are made up of smaller particles called quarks. We can't conceive of any of this, but science tells us it exists, and we have proof that it pretty much does. How small are atoms? Well, it would take 200 quintillion hydrogen atoms to fill up the head of a pin. 200 quintillion is the number 200 followed by 18 zeros. That's pretty small, but the small exists, as does the large. The large exists. What is the largest thing we know of? The largest physical thing we know of is our known universe, which Albert Einstein calculated to be 70 billion light years across. Now, what is a light year? I said light travels at 186,300 miles a second, which basically equates to 7.5 times around the equator in 1 second. That's pretty quick. That's how fast light goes in a second. A light year is how far light can travel in 1 year. God, that's unbelievable just to think about. I'll tell you how many miles light can go in a year. Light can go about 6 trillion miles in 1 year. 6 trillion, that's a lot of miles. That's more than I'm gonna ever drive, I can tell you that. The diameter of the universe, calculated by Einstein, was 558 sextillion miles. He said it was about, what did he say? It was 93, somewhere between 70 and 90 billion light years, which is close to 558 sextillion miles. That's 558 with 21 zeros behind it. That's how big the universe is. Here's my point. Everything, from the smallest thing that we know to the largest thing that we know, and everything in between, there is order. You have electrons circling in atoms. You have atoms making up molecules, molecules making up matter. You have planets being circled by moons, planets circling stars, stars moving through the universe. You actually have solar systems moving through galaxies, galaxies moving through the universe. There is order to everything. Did this happen accidentally? Or was it done with a purpose? That's up to everybody to decide. But I think everything has perfect order. A perfect example, the Earth is what, 83 million miles from the sun, something like that? We have life on Earth. But had Earth been closer to the sun, like Venus, or further from the sun, like Mars, there could be no life on Earth. But Earth happened to be in the right place so they could have life on Earth. I don't think this happened accidentally. Now, when the Big Bang happened, and it's funny, they astrophysicists have spoken for God, the last, 20 years, 25 years, that the Big Bang was the start of everything. And today, physicists and astrophysicists are questioning, yes, there was something before the Big Bang. The bottom line is, I don't think we know. But we have been told from the Big Bang that 4 of the essential building blocks of life, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, those are the building blocks of life that came about in gases from the Big Bang. On Earth, all life, all animal life is composed of those. But how did we end up so different? If we're all composed of the same thing, and everything is basically composed of the same thing, how did we, as human beings, end up so different? Let's say you could have a scale of life on Earth, animal life, that goes from 1 to 100, and you take the simplest animal life, and I'm not talking about bacteria or protozoa or anything like that, but let's just take the simplest animal life, which, let's say, are insects. And on a scale of 1 to 100, they're at 1. And then you keep going up, and you've got, you've got reptiles and amphibians and mollusks and fish, and you get to mammals. And then in the mammal world of mammals, you've got the intelligent ones, such as dogs and cats and apes and dolphins. And let's say they have hit 10 on the scale of 1 to 100. And then we have people that are at 100 on 1 to 100. What makes us so different? Why is it that we can build everything that you see on this planet? Why is it that we can write poetry, compose music, write books? What makes people so different than every other form of animal life on this planet, considering the fact that we are physically made up of the same thing? Is it the size of our brain? Not really, because of the fact that there are animals that have larger brains than we have. What makes us so different? What makes us so different is God has given us an eternal soul. And we have a soul which no other animals have. I do believe that, and I've read that there are animals like dogs, and I have a dog, they have a certain spirit, okay, but they do not have an eternal soul like we have. This is something we have, and we have been given an intellect along with this, our soul, where we have the ability to do things, create things that no other creature on this planet can do or ever will do. If this is true, that we are so different, how did it happen? It's because we were created by a creator with a purpose. We are not accidentally here. Interesting. I remember a story, speaking of creation. Back in 18th century Ireland, I think it was, there was a fellow who was named Charles Boyle, and he was the 4th Earl of Orrery. And I have no idea what that is. I think it might be cool to be an earl, but I don't think I'll ever be an earl. But he was an earl. He was the fourth Earl of Orrery, and he had studied Kepler's laws of planetary motion. He was really fascinated by it. So after studying it, and he lived in a castle, he built in this castle a model of our solar system, and it took up an entire room. It was incredible. It had at the center a ball, which was the sun. Around this ball, there were planets of different sizes, and around the planets were moons. And this thing was incredible. And this is, keep in mind, this is back in the 1800s. A friend came over to his castle who was an atheist, and he saw it, and he just said, wow. I don't know, he didn't say wow, but he saw it and he thought, wow, this is just incredible. And he said to Charles Boyle, who built this? Where did it come from? And Charles Boyle looked at his friend, and his friend was an atheist. He looked at his friend and he said, no one built it. It just happened. And his friend said, there's no possible way. Look at this. This is so unbelievable. This is so intricate. It could not just happen. Somebody had to build it. And Boyle said, I'll tell you what. He said, I am willing to admit to you that this did not just happen if you are willing to admit that our solar system did not just happen. His atheist friend became a believer in God. I think that's an absolute fascinating story. Let me do this. Let me read something. Where is it? In closing, that I find pretty much sums it up. All right, where is it? Where is it? Here it is. This pretty much sums up science and religion. And it sums it up for us today. In today's physical world, science has brought about many phenomenal successes, more so than any time in history. At the same time, the failure of religion to establish peace and bring about unity in the world, as well as the increasing secularization of religion and society, create the idea that the revealed knowledge of the prophets, that is the basis for all religion, is not nearly as reliable as the intuitive knowledge of the modern scientist. Scientific knowledge is seen as certain and absolute, while revealed knowledge is open to conjecture and interpretation. Of course, the reason for this way of thinking stems from the fact that the revealed knowledge of the prophets of old, which dealt with social aspects of men, was for a different time in history. The religions based upon these revelations are all that most of us are familiar with. However, this is slowly changing, and I certainly hope so. I certainly enjoyed talking to everybody. One thing I will say also, and one of the reasons that I was attracted to the Baha'i faith as an atheist is I was told by Baha'is, you cannot believe what I say. You cannot take it as gospel because I say it. You have to find out for yourself. And I'm saying the same thing here as a Baha'i. Anything that I ever say, that anyone hears me say, they can't take that as truth because I happen to say it and I'm a Baha'i. They have the ability to prove it or disprove it if they have the need and or the desire. Hey, thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting and very nice to hear your personal experience with this topic as well. If anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat. So the first question is, thanks for such a wonderful presentation. How do you understand the Baha'i teachings of evolution versus creationism?
Evolution, that's interesting. A lot of times when people think about evolution, they say that man evolved, man meaning human beings evolved from apes. This is not true. We did not evolve from apes. However, I'm not saying that evolution did not exist. Evolution is 100% true, but man did not evolve from apes. Man did evolve, but what we are today, what we evolved from, always had the potential to be what we are today. Just like apes, monkeys, gorillas, orangutans, what they are today, they evolved from something that had the potential to become what they are today. So we did not evolve from apes. Evolution versus creationism. When I think of creationism, I think of astrophysics. So it's pretty hard for me to talk about evolution of the species when we're dealing with astrophysics, because to me that's what creationism is pretty much about, is how everything was created, starting with the Big Bang. But no, we evolve. Everything evolves. Everything progresses.
Thank you. There's a question about where your last reading came from, like what the source was.
Oh, wow. I wrote it. This is my book, The Reality of All Our Life. Our Soul, Life and Death, God and Religion, a whole bunch of science with a little humor mixed in. Actually, I put a lot of humor in the book. I wrote that. I wrote this book about, God, 9 years ago. And the reason I wrote it, now I'll be very brief about why I wrote this book. I talk about our dreams in the book. My dreams are extremely powerful. I remember there's not a morning I wake up where I don't have this dream in my head that I just had. And they're all good dreams, but they're just so strange. And I wanted to write a book about my dreams. Well, I believe, and I've read this before, the dreams are partially journeys of our soul. Our soul, okay, the laws of time and space deal with the physical, and our soul is not physical. Therefore, it is not bound by the physical laws of time and space. Our soul can travel to a different place in a different time, either ahead in time, back in time. And I believe a lot of our dreams are the journeys of our soul. And so I wanted to write a book about our dreams, but I had to talk about the journeys of our soul. Then I said, okay, if I'm going to write about our soul, I've got to talk about what our soul is. Then I have to say, okay, if I have to talk about God, and I have to talk about religion. If I'm, this all stemmed from my dreams. And it was a fun book to write. It was a fun book to write. Now, I appreciate you asking that question.
Thank you. The next one is not a question, but a comment, which is the irony of atheism is that those who take this position often do so claiming that their perspective is scientific and not based on faith. However, from a scientific perspective, to declare that God does not exist is an assertion without supporting evidence. It is therefore, by common definition, a statement of faith and violates the scientific perspective. Science is by nature agnostic, withholding belief until evidence supports belief. The furthest the scientific perspective can go with regards to denial of God is agnosticism. So I don't know if you have any further comments on that.
That's very well said. As I said, science deals with the physical and God is not physical. Interesting. An atheist said, can you prove that? An atheist will say, can you prove the existence of God? Talking about physical proof. And I will say, can you or anybody else prove that God does not exist? Is there any proof that God does not exist? And to this point in my life, nobody has shown me a grain of proof that God does not exist. Then there's logic. Okay, I just, and as I said, I was there. I was an atheist. Logically, there has to be a creator. It comes down to the non-physical world. We cannot relate to the non-physical. And God is not physical. And our soul is not physical. When we die and our body goes into the ground and decomposes, our physical body, and our non-physical soul goes to the next non-physical world of God. We can't relate to this, just like a baby in the womb cannot relate to this world until he dies of the womb world and is born into this world. We can't relate to the next world because it's non-physical. We cannot relate to anything that's non-physical. And that's where faith and logic come together.
I guess I have one in the meantime. So how did you go from, I guess, being an atheist and then believing in God, and then also that there are these divine manifestations that reveal or explain certain divine truths? How, I feel like that's a very big leap. Can you explain how you came to believe in that?
Well, I came to believe in God, as I said, by reading Einstein and the writings of the Baha'i Faith. Reading Einstein didn't have anything to do with the manifestations. It was just the existence of a creator. But reading the writings of the Baha'i Faith, when I learned that the Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, Shoghi Effendi, the four main principles of the faith, that everything they said, everything that I read was what they wrote in their own hand. And reading this, especially the writings of Baha'u'llah, I came to realize that this was not a philosophy. This was not an opinion. It could not be an ordinary human being writing this. It had to be something coming from a higher plane. And I realized that, yeah, logically also, if God is going to speak to his creation, us, if he's going to teach us, logically, it's going to be through something we can relate to. It's not going to be through a bolt of lightning out of the sky or something airy-fairy or something like that. It's going to be through another human being. And that's what the prophets are. They are other human beings. They suffer just like we do. But when you read the writings of the Baha'i writings, at least for me, I came to realize that these came from somewhere else. And it made sense to me. It just made sense to me.
That makes sense. Thank you. We don't have any more questions, so we can end now. I'm sure when we upload this on YouTube, people will probably have more questions then. Thank you so much, Mr. Cohen, for your talk and sharing your experience.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So next week, our speaker will be Mr. Michael Corona, and his topic is a shared humanity between African Americans and Indigenous peoples. So again, these talks are every Saturday at noon Eastern time, and I'll put the link to our contact form and our YouTube channel in the chat. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye.